turn to a staunch defender of First Amendment when it comes to Paul Levinson.
I'll give you a short answer to your question, and then I'll talk about what I was going to talk about. It's protected because anybody who can read English should see that the First Amendment clearly says Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech. Last time I checked, whether we like Trump or not, that was speech. And the only way in which it wouldn't be protected is if we adopted the clear and present danger decision as gospel. But again, I think that even that decision was wrong, and I subscribe to what Justices Hugo Black and William Douglas said, which is no law means no law. But I'll be happy to get back to that later. Earlier today, I was invited to give a talk up at the University of Toronto next month, and I was asked if I had a title, and I hadn't expected to give a talk, but that never stopped me before. So I said sure, and the title I gave them is Marshall McLuhan, Donald Trump, and the Revenge of Cool. So now I'll explain to you what I meant by that. First of all, in addition to writing science fiction, I also write nonfiction, and a lot of it has been about Marshall McLuhan. And I should admit that critics of my science fiction say this is too philosophic, it reads like science fiction, and critics of my science fiction say this is really, boring, scholarly stuff. So I take that both as a compliment. I'm glad that critics of my science fiction think it reads like nonfiction and vice versa. There's not all that much difference between the two. And a lot of people thought McLuhan was science fiction, but he wasn't. And one of his most important concepts, even though he went to great pains to say he doesn't deal with concepts, he deals with prose, who cares? It doesn't really matter what we label them. But he came up with this distinction or taxonomy between hot and cool media, which I'm sure most of you have heard about. A hot medium is something that gives you an enormous amount of information, it washes over you. A cool medium gives you much less information, it's much more blurry, unclear, incomplete. And the secret of cool media is that because they're so indistinct and unclear, is they draw the perceiver, the reader, the viewer into the image, the text, the words. So, poetry is cool, prose is hot. Most famously, motion pictures, big screens are hot. Television in those days, small, blurry screens are cool. And McLuhan, in fact, explicitly applied this to the Kennedy-Nixon debates, saying that Kennedy did better than Nixon in those debates because Kennedy was relaxed. Nixon was like extremely explicit, intense. It didn't help that he looked like a nervous used car salesman. Nobody wanted to buy anything from him. But it dawned on me early on in this insane political season that we are now living in that cool might well explain the success of Donald Trump. Now, to begin with, if you look at Trump superficially, he makes aggressive statements all the time, angry comments on Twitter, insulting people, the kinds of things that Susan was talking about are all over the place. How then could that possibly be considered cool? Well, first of all, media are rarely completely cool or completely hot. Another point that McLuhan made is that media often have other media embedded in them, and those in turn have other media embedded in them. So if, for example, you watch a motion picture on television, you're watching a hot medium presented in a cool medium, television. If you look at Donald Trump's favorite mode of communication, which is Twitter, you'll see a quintessentially cool medium. In the first place, how much can you possibly say in 140 characters? And the fact is, it's something that is read very quickly, that does not at all encourage thoughtful contemplation. It's literally read increasingly on these little things that people look at quickly, it flashes by. So the medium of Twitter is cool, and even though Trump may say hot, nasty things, it's the coolness that attract people to his commentary. And there are many, many examples of this. Just recently, for example, there was a typical brouhaha in the mass media. Well, is Trump softening his position on immigration, or is he hardening his position on immigration? And Trump was like, ask this, and he was tweeting about it, and over a 24-hour period, he said about 5 times, I'm hardening my position, I'm softening my position, I'm hardening my position. You know what? That's because he has no position. Trump has no position. I think McLuhan would say that Trump is a politician who is all media and no content. And that is the key to his success, because when you have and when you have no position, that means that anybody who encounters you can see in you what they want. And this is what happens all the time. And there are many, many other characteristics that once you begin looking at Trump this way, you can see this. Why is Trump so stiff when he's reading off a teleprompter? I mean, he ranges from sounding like an automaton to, for a while there was a phrase going around on Twitter, it's Xanax Trump. He talks very quietly. It's because the teleprompter and the literal words of the teleprompter are the antithesis of cool. So Trump, he makes it up as he goes along. He has no positions. This is one of the most famous interviews now between Trump and Chris Matthews. Chris Matthews says, well, I mean, do you think women should be punished if they have an abortion? And Trump says, well, yeah, sure, yes, I think they should be punished. So he hadn't even thought of that. He had no position on that. This is why when he's asked questions about ISIS, when he talks about the American military, he literally doesn't know what he's talking about. But that is indeed his appeal. And the last point I'll make, and sort of conclude this on a disquieting note, and then we can talk about this more. One of the most provocative things that McLuhan said about the 1960s, I remember when I first read it, I didn't quite believe it, but I've come to see that it made a lot of sense, is McLuhan said the coolness of the new environment in the 1960s, mainly pushed by television, flipped into violence because people were so enticed by what they were seeing on television and so unable to achieve it that that's what got them out of their houses, into the streets, riots, and so on. And it's a little bit of an extreme statement. There are other things that certainly led to violence. But if you look at the Trump campaign, you see here and there it's beginning to happen. You see violence at some of his rallies, and some of the points that Sue was, making reference to. Take him out. Get him out of here. He's that close to say, take them out of here and shoot them. He occasionally says, I'd like to punch them. So Trump has probably never read a word of Marshall McLuhan, but he is proceeding exactly as McLuhan would explain. And I hope what we see is not worse violence now than we've seen so far. Thank you.